Dear all, on behalf of the University of Bergen, it's both a pleasure and a privilege to welcome you to this year's announcement of the Holberg Prize and the Nils Klim Prize. Established 22 years ago by the Norwegian Parliament, the Holberg Prize honors exceptional contributions in research in the humanities, social sciences, theology, and law. Over the years, the prize has been awarded to a distinguished list of scholars and researchers. Their work has not only enriched their respective fields, but also played a vital role in upholding the principles of critical thought, open dialogue, and independent research. Values that echo the spirit of Ludvig Holberg. In addition, the Holberg Board awards Nils Klim Prize. This prize is awarded to young scholars from or working in one of the Nordic countries. Together, these two prizes stand as powerful acknowledgements of remarkable academic achievements. As we gather to celebrate the well-deserved winners of these esteemed prizes, we cannot ignore the turbulent times and the turbulent world around us. For the third consecutive year, a brutal war is taking place in Europe, with severe and lasting consequences. In the United States, we are witnessing profound changes in multiple areas. Meanwhile, the people in Gaza and the West Bank continue to endure unimaginable hardships. On top of this, the climate crisis presents urgent global challenges that no country will be able to solve alone. The prosperity and stability that we have enjoyed for so many years can no longer be taken for granted. It is precisely in these uncertain times that we must lift our voice and show the importance of our academic values. Now, more than ever, we need researchers who are willing to challenge the status quo and who can serve as ambassadors for the critical and open conversations that shape the future. For our 2 decades, the Holberg Prize and the Nils Klim Prize have been vital in fostering such a dialogue. I would like to give a special thanks to the Holberg Board and the academic committees for your dedicated work. With these words, it is an honor for me to pass the floor to the chair of the Holberg Board, Professor Jørgen Sejersted. He will announce the winner of the Holberg Prize and the Nils Klim Prize for 2025.
Thank you, Professor Margareth Hagen, Rector of the University of Bergen. As our Rector said, the Holberg Prize was established by the Norwegian Parliament in 2003 and was awarded for the first time in 2004. Each year, the Holberg Board awards 2 prizes in the academic fields of the humanities, social sciences, law, and theology. These 2 prizes are the International Holberg Prize and the Nordic Nils Klim Prize. Now, in 2025, these will both be awarded for the 22nd time. The prizes are awarded by the Holberg Board on behalf of the University of Bergen and the Norwegian government, and on the recommendation of academic committees. The academic committees consist of internationally renowned scholars from the relevant disciplines. These prizes celebrate groundbreaking academic achievements. The award ceremony for the Holberg Prize and the Nils Klim Prize take place here in Bergen in June every year. This year's award ceremony will be held here at the University Aula on the 5th of June. And now, first to the Holberg Prize, awarded annually to scholars who have made outstanding contributions to research either within one discipline or through interdisciplinary work. The prize is named after the Danish-Norwegian scholar Ludvig Holberg, who was an exceptional writer and intellectual of the 18th century. The value of the prize is 6 million Norwegian kroner, or approximately 520,000 euros. On behalf of the University of Bergen, and on the recommendation of the Holberg Committee, it is a great pleasure and honor for me to announce that the board of the Holberg Prize has decided that this year's Holberg Prize shall be awarded to Professor Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak. Professor Spivak is an Indian scholar in literary theory. Spivak has held the post of university professor in the humanities at Columbia University since 2007, where she is also a founding member of the Institute for Comparative Literature and Society. She was educated first at the University of Calcutta and then at Cornell University, where she completed her PhD degree in 1967. She has since taught at more than 20 universities, including University of Ghana, Princeton University, University of California at Irvine, New School for Social Research, University of Pittsburgh, Brown University, University of Iowa, Northwestern University, and Cornell University. Spivak is a corresponding fellow at the British Academy, a Guggenheim Fellow, and a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and of the American Philosophical Society. Chair of the Holberg Committee, Professor Heike Krieger of Freie Universität Berlin, will now present the committee's review of the contributions of Gayatri Spivak's work.
Born in Kolkata in 1942, Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak is a graduate of the University of Calcutta and of Cornell University. Holding the post of university professor in the humanities at Columbia University, she is one of the most influential global intellectuals today. Spivak continues to shape several fields in an interdisciplinary manner. These include comparative literature, translation, post-colonial studies, political philosophy, and feminist theory. Her scholarship has been translated into well over 20 languages. She has taught and lectured in more than 50 countries and has received nearly 50 honorary doctorates and prizes from across the globe. Spivak's essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?, has become a formative text within post-colonial studies and beyond. Its global impact exemplifies her challenge to Western scholarship that occludes the perspectives of minoritized groups and their struggles. It was groundbreaking in starting from the experience of women in colonial India to examine questions of voice and power. Her concept of planetarity in her book Death of a Discipline further developed this critical approach, offering an ethical alternative to globalization. Among her many influential books are Critique of Post-Colonial Reason, Aesthetic Education in the Era of Globalization, and Ethics and Politics in Tagore, Coetzee, and Certain Scenes of Teaching. Spivak is committed to an interdisciplinary critique of structures of power and knowledge in an unequal world. In this sense, the labor of translation becomes an act of thinking through the limits of dominant modes of knowledge production. She defines translation as a profoundly philosophical and political act. Her highly influential English translations demonstrate her deep attention to multivocal and diverse epistemes. This is evident in her celebrated translations of Mahasweta Devi's literary works from Bengali, as well as Derrida's philosophical works and Aimé Césaire's political writings from French. As a political intellectual and activist, Spivak combats illiteracy in marginalized rural communities across several countries, including in West Bengal, India, where she has founded, funded and participated in educational initiatives. For Spivak, rigorous creativity must intersect with local initiatives to provide alternatives to intellectual colonialism. Her concepts, such as strategic essentialism and global criticality, are now widely used and debated. Spivak's work challenges readers, students and researchers to train the imagination through a sustained study of literature and culture. Taking the core of Western thought as an object of critical analysis, she has inspired, enabled and supported otherwise inconceivable lines of critical interrogations, both at the centers and margins of global modernity. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak is a highly worthy recipient of the 2025 Holberg Prize.
Thank you, Professor Heike Krieger, for the committee's review. And now to the Nils Klim Prize. The prize is awarded annually to a younger researcher. The prize is named after the protagonist of Holberg's utopian novel Nils Klim's Underground Travels from 1741. The researcher must be from or working in a Nordic country in the fields covered by the Holberg Prize. The prize is awarded to researchers who have made outstanding contributions, either within one discipline or through interdisciplinary work. In the assessment of the nominated candidate, the independence and innovative qualities of the researcher's work are deemed particularly important. The committee also takes into account whether the research contribution is especially outstanding or promising in the light of the scholar's age, the nature of the research project, and traditions in the researcher's academic field. The value of the prize is 500,000 Norwegian kroner, or approximately 43,000 euros. On behalf of the University of Bergen, and on the recommendation of the Nils Klim Committee, it is now my great pleasure and honor to announce that the board of the Holberg Prize has decided that this year's Nils Klim Prize shall be awarded to Assistant Professor Daniela Alatinolu. Daniela Alatinolu is an Assistant Professor of Law at the University of Turku. Dr. Alatinolu holds a PhD in law from the European University Institute from 2019, and she has been awarded the title of Docent of Social Legal Studies by the University of Turku. She is the principal investigator of the ERC project From the Margin to the Center, Rights Development, Transitional Justice, and Indigeneity in the Nordics. Her research has been supported by grants from the Icelandic Research Fund, the Swedish Cultural Foundation in Finland, and the Research Council of Finland, among others. Dr. Alatinolu's work has been published in leading international journals. Her key publications include the monograph Grievance Formation, Rights and Remedies, Involuntary Sterilization and Castration in the Nordics from 1930s to the 2020s, and the co-edited volume Contesting Femicide, Feminism and the Power of Law Revisited. Dr. Alatinolu has been a visiting fellow at institutions including the University of Melbourne and the Max Planck Institute for Social Anthropology. The chair of the Nils Klim Committee, Professor Astradur Eysteinsson of the University of Iceland, will now present the committee's review of the contributions of Daniela Alatinolu's work. Professor Eysteinsson's review will be followed by a greeting from the Norwegian Minister of Research and Higher Education, Sigrun Aasland.
The Nils Klim Committee recommends that Daniela Alatinoglu be awarded the 2025 Nils Klim Prize. Daniela Alatinoglu is Assistant Professor, tenure track in the Faculty of Law at the University of Turku in Finland. She completed her PhD degree in law at the European University Institute in Florence, Italy in 2019, having previously attained both an MA degree in law at the University of Helsinki and an MA degree in comparative European and international laws at the European University Institute. Alatinoglu has already established herself as an independent scholar working across borders and cultures, drawing on various disciplines in coming to task with and interconnecting complex legal and social issues. Her book, Grievance Formation, Rights and Remedies, Involuntary Sterilization and Castration in the Nordics, 1930s to 2020s, published by Cambridge University Press in 2023, and the book Contesting Femicide, Feminism and the Power of Law Revisited, which she co-edited with Adrian Howe, and which was published by Routledge in 2019, bear ample witness to the ways in which she brings legal issues to bear on relevant global concerns and human rights. The same can be said about her impressive number of high-quality journal articles and book chapters. She is also, since 2022, a co-editor of Retferd, Nordic Journal of Law and Justice. Moreover, Alatinoglu is an active contributor to a number of research groups and initiatives at the University of Turku and at the European level. Reflecting the ways in which her research links law and society, she also contributes regularly to discussions in the public sphere, both by writing or co-writing working papers and policy reports, as well as producing op-eds and blog posts. Such work is carried out in Finnish, Swedish, Norwegian, Spanish, and English. In addition to her teaching experience, publications, and editorial expertise, she has been a visiting fellow and lecturer at universities in several countries. While Daniela Alatinoglu is already a prominent scholar in her field, her academic contributions also contain important future challenges for a good number of relevant legal, social, and political spheres on the international scene. For the reasons stated above, Daniela Alatinoglu is a most worthy recipient of the 2025 Nils Klim Prize.
The Holberg Prize celebrates groundbreaking scientific work in the humanities, social sciences, law and theology. This year, we honor Professor Gayatri Spivak of Columbia University. The academic fields recognized by the Holberg Prize are essential, both in terms of producing knowledge and of how they teach us the practice of learning. In our times, where these academic fields are under considerable pressure, it is essential for the Norwegian government and others that we honor these important academic fields. The Holberg Prize is a significant way to advance that goal. Dear Professor Spivak, the Norwegian government would like to congratulate you on being awarded the 2025 Holberg Prize for your path-breaking work. You are one of the most influential global intellectuals of our time, and your work has shaped literary criticism and philosophy since the 1970s. You're also both a scholar, a public intellectual, and an activist, and your decades-long commitment to development and education in many parts of the Global South is an inspiration to us all. I would also like to congratulate Assistant Professor Daniela Alatinolu on being awarded the Nils Klim Prize. Your research into how laws and societies evolve together and how groups mobilize for change will be important to both scholars, politicians, and society at large in the years to come. Norway strives to be a country that prioritizes education, research, and innovation in order to improve the quality of life for all citizens. That means that we must fight for academic freedom, freedom of speech, and the respect for research and knowledge. These are not only essential for academic work, but pillars in an open society with equal opportunities for all. We are constantly reminded of how the biggest challenges we face today are of global nature. We need the best possible research-based knowledge to address them. In these precarious times, we need the expertise and advice from the world's brightest minds on how to work towards sustainability, stability, and more common understanding. I am certain that the Holberg Prize and the Nils Klim Prize will serve as a celebration of excellence and an inspiration to new scholars. Congratulations to you both, and I wish you warmly welcome to Norway and Bergen in June.
Thank you. Thank you to Professor Astradur Eysteinsson for presenting the committee's review. Thank you to the Minister for her greeting, to the laureates. And last but not least, thank you to Tore Bordal for having provided us with two beautiful musical pieces today. First, we heard Syljetone by Harald Sæverud, and this was followed by Til våren, to spring, by Edvard Grieg. We now move on in our program, and I am happy to be able to welcome you all to a brief conversation about our two prize recipients. For this purpose, I would like to welcome onto the stage Associate Professor Kari Jegerstedt and Professor Jørn Jacobsen. Please. Let us start by talking a bit about the Holberg Prize winner first. And in that regard, I'm really happy to have with me on stage here Associate Professor Kari Jegerstedt. Jegerstedt is the head of department for the Center for Women's and Gender Research here at the University of Bergen. And as a literary scholar, she has particularly worked with issues such as feminist critique and post-colonial theory. And you have engaged topics related to power, gender, and philosophy. So, welcome, and thank you for coming here. And let me start then with you and the Holberg Prize recipient. As we also heard from the committee, the 2025 Holberg Prize laureate, Gayatri Spivak, is an outstanding scholar in her field, or perhaps more accurately, fields in the plural. So could you give us your perspective on those fields, what they are, and the nature of Spivak's contribution?
Well, thank you. I can try. First of all, I just have to say I'm really, really pleased that Gayatri Spivak got the Holberg Prize finally. She has been a very important scholar in so many fields, and also for me personally. I usually tell my students that everything I know I learned from reading Spivak. But of course, what she has done through decades now is try to carve out a political and ethical use of our terms of critical theory and philosophy and literature to try to challenge the legacy of colonialism. And as such, she is one of the founding figures of post-colonial theory, which like somewhat simplistically could be said that it's a critical study of the discursive practices that has divided the world or shaped the world into this division between us and them, modern, so-called pre-modern, the Orient, Occident, global North, global South, that underpin the whole project of imperialism, that imperialism couldn't have happened if it didn't view the world in this way. And she also argues, a post-colonial theory argues that these kind of structures still shape how we perceive the world today. And it has structured our scientific sciences, literature, culture, everything. So the point now is like in those post-colonial times is to try to view the world in a different way and to kind of like wrest the concepts that we have been working with out of these structures and set them play anew to open up for more global understanding of the world, for social justice, very important for her. And of course, she has been also working particularly with a perspective from the global south and from the subaltern women in India and Southeast Asia more generally, whose voices have been actually effaced. I know, like, they mentioned this one famous essay by her, Can the Subaltern Speak, from 1988, which is like this founding essay of post-colonial thought, where she's criticizing this debate amongst Western intellectuals, like, can the working class speak for themselves? Can the oppressed speak for themselves? And they all say, yeah, of course they can. And she comes and says, no, they can't. If you look at the other place, like she's also using an economic argument. She's a Marxist, uses Marx a lot. So if you look at the other side of the International Division of Labor, you have people who cannot speak for themselves because their subject position isn't part of the history. And then she goes through, she reads how the codification of Hindu law and England, who had this imperialism as a social mission to save women from being burned as widows. And you can see that everything that's written down is either from the perspective of the colonizer or from the Indian elite. And no one spoke to the women that it actually happened to. Yes. And so there's a whole kind of possibility of speaking that's lost. Yes. And that's what she's working to. How can you get this position back? How can you speak when you don't have a language that can be heard?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Karim, may I ask you, we heard a lot of her, some of her more famous works were cited here, but do you have some personal favorites among her?
As a literary scholar, yeah, so many, many. But of course, what has influenced me the most is also how she reads and how she reads literature. So I love her reading. So for example, Jamaica Kincaid, of J.M. Coetzee, of Masmeta Devi, of course. And one kind of personal favorite is the 2003, which is actually a collection of lectures she held that's called Death of a Discipline, where she's tried to rethink how literary studies, how they can contribute in a global world by thinking differently about reading literature. And she has this also idea of what an aesthetic education or an education in humanities can actually do, is what she calls like the uncoercive rearrangements of our desires, so that we learn to desire differently in the world, that we train our imagination, that we can see our own existence and other existence in the world in new ways, that opens up for different perspectives. But at the same time, remembering that you cannot never understand the other fully, kind of holding up this otherness as something kind of mysterious or something, so you don't just think that you can understand everything, fix everything. Is this kind of like ethical encounter with the other?
Yes.
And if you do I have time to mention another favorite? Yes. Because I'm teaching gender theory. I've done so for 25 years, and I've always been teaching this one essay, French Feminism in an International Frame, which is a really early essay from 1981, where she's taking stock of her own training in feminism, French feminism, and then just asking the basic question, what does actually all these high theory mean for people in the South, for people who are not part of this? Yes. And here she sketches a lot of like different ways that you can go about thinking about the feminist struggle, for example, talking about unlearning your privilege as a kind of loss. You might think you're privileged, but it only means that you cannot understand a lot of things because you can't see the other's perspective. Learning to learn from below, which has been very important for her thinking.
Yes, thank you. That was actually my last question. You
answered
that about societal significance and how she can, contribute to our understanding of the world. And I think you answered that very well now. Would you say that she has shaped or changed or redirected the field of literary studies or aesthetic philosophy in a way? Oh, definitely,
definitely. In this one famous article from 1986, which is actually a reading of some feminist literature from 19th century Britain, she says that it shouldn't be possible to read fiction, British fiction, from the 19th century without looking into how literature played a really important role in shaping the concept of Englishness for the English and of imperialism as a social mission. When she said that in 1986, it was kind of like, what? We can't do that? It was not something that people actually have thought about. Now it would be impossible not to think about it. And of course, like literary scholars, they have different questions they ask, but you can't really teach literature anymore without taking imperialism into account, without analyzing Western literature like that, and also without opening for a canon that's much broader than the Western canon. Of course, like Spivak wants us to, we should all know a language from the global South in addition to the European languages in order to fully open it. I don't know if literary studies have come that far yet, I mean, but you can't really teach literature in the same way. And the same for feminist theory, which is really, really important. You can't talk about feminism as this kind of liberation strategy from Western societies without looking at how imperialism have influenced how we think about feminism today, and how the women from the global South have been excluded or constructed in a certain way that Western feminists are supposed to help her, and that has had an enormous influence on all kind of feminist theory. Yeah.
Has this work, you think, has it been controversial? Has she been, a daring scholar? Has she had to be that through her career? Or?
Well, I would say that Spivak, of course, is controversial in post-colonial theory and feminist theory is controversial in and by itself. So just by working in those fields, she's controversial. And I'm so glad both the rector and the minister is drawing our attention to what is happening now in the US, and also at the university, which she stays in Columbia, where all these kind of thinkings are so much under pressure. So yes, and she has been controversial for many different reasons. Also for one reason, maybe, that she's known to be kind of difficult to read. Yeah. And she has an answer to that, is kind of like plain prose cheats. Because the whole point is here to try to kind of work out the complexity of languages, the complexity of thinking, to open up for different perspectives. Yes. But I always urge my students to read her anyway. Sometimes you read difficult texts and you understand something, then, not so interesting. But if you do really get into it, it will it does alter your way of thinking and understanding the world, definitely.
Well, my last question to you would be that we have some laureates, they are working within one field, specifically in one field, and some are more interdisciplinary in their work. And what would you say about, how would you characterize Spivak? Is she mostly a literary theory, or is she sort of interdisciplinary? And if so, in what way would you say?
Well, I mean, she's obviously very interdisciplinary. She works with philosophy, she works with critical theory, she works with literary studies, feminism, Marxism, Derridian deconstruction. She's also very important for translation studies. And when you read her work, I mean, all of these things are there in every sentence that she writes. What's very specific about her way of working interdisciplinary is that she's not thinking that if you all talk about like all these like historical texts and philosophical texts and literary texts together, then you will get a full picture. But she's trying to test out the limits from one discourse to the other, to kind of bring them into crisis, so to speak, and where they clash, some new kind of insight will come out. And that's how she works with all her work. She has this, if I can just say,
yes,
a wonderful way of thinking. She works with concept metaphors, not with concepts or with metaphors, but with concept metaphors. And concepts, of course, is this very precise way of doing language within philosophical thinking. And metaphors is this rich kind of figurative language in literature. And she puts them together in a way that they can speak with each other and kind of challenge each other. So that's one way of saying how she works interdisciplinary.
Well, thank you very much, Kari, for very helpful insights and help in how to read, I think, Spivak, which can come across as challenging. Yes. Thank you very much. We now move on to the second panelist here, Professor Jørgen Jacobsen. Jørgen is professor at the Faculty of Law, specializing in criminal law and legal theory in light of Kantian legal philosophy. His latest monograph is titled Power, Principle and Progress, Kant and the Republican Philosophy of Nordic Criminal Law from 2024. So thank you so much for joining us, Jørgen, and welcome here to the panel. So, well, I'll start, I think, with the same question. You know the work of Daniela Alatinoglu, and so how would you characterize the field she's working in and her specific contribution?
Well, Daniela Alatinoglu is a very worthy recipient of the Nils Klim Prize. She is what you could call a law and context scholar that not only sticks to internal perspectives in law, but also considers how law is implemented and become effective in society. And she does this in regard to human rights issues, core human rights issues, in particular in regard to marginalized groups. And she has developed a very subtle understanding of how human rights cultures develop in different countries and how social processes and also individual processes co-act in order to ensure that some have their rights and remedies for wrongs in human rights, in the human rights discourse. So this is a very sort of inventive and subtle development of our understanding of human rights and how they become effective in society. So, and she also not only sort of has done this thoroughly in her dissertation, where she discussed issues relating to involuntary castration and sterilization, but it also applied and developed these perspectives in numerous fields of the human rights discourse.
Of course, the Nils Klim Prize is a Nordic prize, or it's awarded to young scholars working in or being from the Nordic countries. But could you say a little about the relationship between the Nordic perspective of these problems and international or the global relevance?
Yes. she has a clear sort of Nordic and Scandinavian perspective in her research, in the sense that she applies certain case studies from the Scandinavian countries, for instance, in her dissertation. That said, of course, the perspectives and the understanding of the interaction between law and society in this field is not at all limited to our Nordic countries. This has general relevance in the world, and particularly in developments in the world today in regard to the human rights.
Thank you. Could you also, I would also, that question of interdisciplinarity, because sometimes I think of law as much a sort of a very specialized discipline. But you already mentioned a little bit about the interdisciplinarity.
Yeah, and that sort of follows from this sort of law in context perspective that she has developed, in a sense that sort of it does in a very subtle way combine a thorough understanding of law from an inner perspective, the traditional legal perspective, but also goes beyond that and into the society and implementation of it, which requires quite other skills in terms of social perspectives and psychological perspectives and political discourse and so forth. So there is a sort of very inherent interdisciplinary aspect of her research. Yes.
Would you say that Alatinolu, she's a young researcher, of course, but is she a distinctive researcher? Does she represent a particular position that sets her apart from?
Yes, you could truly call her distinctive, but primarily in the way that she has, in a very sort of independent and original way, developed our perspectives in discourses that we're all as lawyers and legal scholars thoroughly involved in a way. So she's very distinctive in the sense that she has really contributed to our new understanding of the human rights discourse and how human rights can become effective in society. And this, of course, is also a very sort of worthy subject from the perspective of Holberg, of course. Also in this sense, she is a very worthy recipient of the prize.
Exactly, yes. Ludwig Holberg, he wrote the first textbook of natural law in Danish and Norwegian. So that's a tradition there. So, well, you already said actually a lot about it, but could you elaborate a little more on that, the societal significance of this kind of research?
Yes, of course. Human rights obviously is a core part of any rule of law-based society, like the Nordic countries, for instance. But one thing is sort of whether we have sort of rights as principles and abstract entities and ideals and so forth. Another issue is whether sort of we all have our rights recognized and are allowed remedies when we are wronged in this regard. And in particular in regard to marginalized groups, this is a sort of often underplayed subject that we sort of tend to have a more favorable picture of ourselves as a rights-based society than we actually are, sort of. And in this regard, certainly sort of the recipient of the prize has really developed and pushed our understanding and realized that sort of it's not self-evident that human rights are implemented and achieved in society for the many individuals that we are in it.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much for that, Jørgen. And I would like to thank both panelists for having shed considerable light on the academic contributions of Spivak and Alatinolu. So thank you very much. Let me remind the audience that the Holberg Week, with a number of events in celebration of the laureates, will take place here in Bergen from the 3rd to the 5th of June, and in Oslo on the 6th of June. The award ceremonies themselves will take place on the 5th of June. To conclude, and on behalf of the Holberg Board, I would like to extend my warmest congratulations to Professor Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak and Dr. Daniela Alatinolu on being awarded their respective and very well-deserved prizes. Congratulations. So, the one thing that remains is to say thank you to all those attending the ceremony today and to those watching around the world. Thank you very much.